These are the top 10 things you should know about the African slave voyages. Number 1. The slave voyages went on for over 300 years. From the first occurrence in the year 1500 all the way until 1866, there was a wide span of time that Africans were sent overseas. Number 2. 12.5 million Africans were transported. During that span of over 300 years, 90% were brought to the Americas, and the rest in areas of Europe like Great Britain. 3. Slaves were packed on ships in two different ways. They were either loosely packed, which meant that there were less slaves than the ship's capacity was able to carry, or they were tightly packed, which meant there were as many slaves packed in like sardines as possible. 4. The ships typically had very poor hygiene. If they were lucky enough to get their own bucket, they were rarely cleaned. The ship's cargo area was typically filled with the smell of feces, urine, and vomit that the African slaves had to live in during the duration of their voyages. 5. Suicide is very common on these voyages. Every day, there are many suicide attempts. Some tried jumping off the ships, others tried getting others to strangle them, or even starve themselves. The captains even came up with ways to stop them from committing suicide, like forcing food down their throats or putting up nets to catch the people jumping overboard. 6. Not enough food was provided to maintain health and strength. Most of the time, they were given just enough food to keep them alive, but not enough to keep them healthy and strong. 7. Disease was very common on the slave voyages. Things like dysentery, diarrhea, scurvy, and smallpox even were devastating to the Africans on the ships. 8. The average voyage lasted up to 2 months. Because the technology at the time relied heavily on sails, all of the ships used the wind to travel and could take upwards of 2 months, even 6 months in some cases, depending on where they were going. 9. Over 12% of those who voyaged did not survive. Because of the poor hygiene, disease, and suicide, many deaths occurred. Even many crew members died from diseases and even attempted suicide. 10. Many Africans tried to revolt. While the voyaging Africans lived in fear, that didn't stop many of them from trying to rise up and fight back. Revolting was tricky because crew members were always keeping tabs on Africans, so they had to find secret ways to communicate. Insurrection groups who survived the onslaught of weapons used by the crew were sometimes able to take control of the whole ship, which happened on occasion. And that's it. These are the top 10 things you should know about the African slave voyages.